actually, before I jump into slide 1, I'm going to clarify something from session 3 that I had mentioned. And I was talking about the 50% rule when we're talking about things with wheels. So all of our toys like trucks, cars, snowmobiles, four-wheelers, go-karts, dune buggies, anything and everything with wheels. And I said it can't be more than 50% of your income. I didn't want people to think that meant your annual income every year. That doesn't mean your payments should be 50% of your annual income. So what that means is that if my annual income is $80,000, all of my toys combined aren't worth more than 40. So it's the total value of those toys, not payments. So don't get that confused. So we had an RV question, and the RV would probably count toward that rule. And again, if you're retired, I guess, and you're RVing around, that's your mortgage then. So that's different. But okay, so I just wanted to clarify that and make sure, because I had a question about that. All right, so we're going to jump in. We want to look at the difference between buying a car. So how do we buy a car properly? What are some of the costs associated with that car? And I had mentioned last time that my kind of sweet spot for buying a car is usually around $1,000 to $2,000 a month or a year in ownership cost. That's mostly the depreciation. That doesn't necessarily include maintenance and oil changes and fuel and insurance and all those other things. But if we have kind of similar cars or a Honda Civic and a Toyota Camry and maybe even a basic V6 truck, probably all have kind of similar insurance costs, oil change, maybe gas usage, although the truck, a little more, things like that. So what we actually budget for the car will be about the same, and if it's not going to be the same, we need to account for that in our decision, in our financial decision. So what I want to look at is leasing. This is something near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. They love to go out, they get a brand new car every few years, and they get to drive that car up to 12,000 miles a year usually, and they don't have to worry about a thing. No maintenance, no nothing. The dealership takes care of everything usually. So you put some money down. So what I did is I said, let's look at, I believe, a Honda Accord in these examples. So we're going to look at a Honda Accord, and we want to say, well, if I were to lease a Honda Accord, it's about $249 for 36 months. It's actually probably higher than that, but maybe I downgrade to a Civic and I can get this price. They usually want you to put about $2,000 down, and I have a 12,000 mile a year limit, which for anyone who commutes out here, leasing doesn't work, because I thought about it, but financially the numbers don't work very well, and mileage is a problem. So what you're going to spend over that 3-year, 36-month period total is $3,600 per year times 3 plus the $2,000. So you're going to spend about $10,963. I actually don't think I added the money down in that, so it's probably about $12,000, because 10.96K is just 3 times that. So yeah, add $2,000 to that. So that's about what our cost for a lease is. And you can see that our cost per year is still about $3,600, $500. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I divided the $2,000 into the base cost. I think that's what I did there. Either way, every year it costs you about $3,600 to own that leased vehicle. All right, now let's say instead, you say, well, Josh, you say never to lease. I'm going to just buy the car outright, brand new right now. Well, let's say the sticker on it's $24,000 and we get a 4.71% interest rate. I think last year when I wrote these slides, that's what I found. You might do better, you might do worse. So you're going to spend, if I pay cash today, $24,020. Now, if I finance it for 48 months with a $550 payment, then I will have spent about $26,400 total. Because remember, we look at what the total cost of something is, not what the payment is. Okay, so the 3-year, if I paid cash, cost per year is about $2,300. If I financed it, it's about $3,100. And that was assuming that I would sell it for about $17,000. So the next one is, let's say I own it 5 years. So these are just different scenarios. I own a car 3 years and I sell it. I own a car 5 years and I sell it. Or I own a car 10 years and I sell it. What's kind of the cost per ownership? Question.
So you're going off a new car, which in the first year depreciates average 25% of the thing. What about buying a 2 or 3-year-old car?
I'll get to that. The question is, what if I buy a 2 or 3-year-old car? And again, we're analyzing the car decision. So I'm starting with leasing and I'm starting with a brand new, and then we're going to jump to that, buying used. That's the next slide. So okay, let's say I own it 5 years. If I paid cash, and you guys can see if I finance it, it always costs me more. And it's going to cost me more divided among the whole term that I own the vehicle. So the 5-year cost is about $2,400. It's actually more expensive per year in terms of loss than if I would have kept it 3 years. So you see that keeping it 3 years and selling it might have been slightly better. Or 10 years, I drive the wheels off of it. It costs me about $1,900 a year, which that's in that sweet spot I was telling you I like to try to get between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. So if you're going to buy a new car and keep it 10 years, you might get to a Josh-approved level of ownership. So I went out and I looked at, again, these are based on, I think, 2019 or 2020 of what I found. So I went for, let's look for your 3-year-old car. Let's look for your 7-year-old sort of nice beater car, let's say, in a 2013. And then I looked at a salvage car. Those are very common down here to be able to find. You have to be careful. You have to know what you're looking for. I'm not heavily advocating salvage or not, but we're looking at the costs, okay? So the 2013 EXL, we get our 3-year cost per year is right around $1,000, and our 5 years around $1,100, because we're kind of buying it already after it's depreciated most of its way. We're driving it for a couple years, and then we're selling it when it still hasn't probably depreciated that much. So we can get to a pretty good cost per year. The 2017 Accord Sport looks like it's about $2,500 or about $1,900. And again, guys, I'm assuming in all these cases that we're paying cash for these, not financing them. So if we're financing them, what happens to these numbers? They go up. Okay, good. And you can finance private sale things. I'll just insert that real quick, guys. If you're online and you find a car on Craigslist or Facebook Market or something that's not at a dealer and you did want to finance it, that is possible. Another thing I'm going to mention here is I'm talking about Hondas. Hondas typically hold their value a little better than some of the other cars. Ford Focus comes to mind as one that depreciates really fast for some reason. So I'm just sort of taking this one, and this is maybe a better case scenario or a best case scenario. Okay, so the Sport, you can see we have, if we own it 5 years, we get under that $2,000 that we want. And then the 2018 Salvage, if we buy it for $12,000 and we have it 3 years, in both cases, 3 or 5 years, we're in a pretty good rate, $1,500 or less each year of ownership. And then I'll use the example of the one I bought. I had a very short turnaround, about 2 weeks, to find my car and buy it. And it was a salvage title car. I got it for about half off of what the new price would have been. And I've been driving it 2 years. And if I sold it for even $3,000, or if I drive it one more year and sell it for $3,000, it'll have cost me about $1,300 a year to own. So that shows you I kind of practice what I preach with cars. Okay, I thought we looked at, we did look at the used ones, so that covered that. Go ahead.
So for leasing, what if the job a person has allows that to be a tax write-off?
Okay, so the question is, what if leasing allows it to be a tax write-off? What you're going to find is that most of the time, okay, so this requires a really brief tax explanation. So when we do our taxes every year, we have what's called a standard deduction. This is what the government gives most American families, that you can just check that box and take that deduction and be done with it. And that kind of assumes, hey, this is what the average American spends on gas, spends on doing things business related, spends on things for their life, whatever, and you just take that deduction. If you're in business for yourself, you need to find ways to get your deductions to be higher than that $12,000 that the government gives us every year. For a lot of families, that's a little bit, can be difficult to do. So for most families who are kind of in middle or lower class, the standard deduction's usually pretty good. That being said, if I can start writing things off and getting my write-offs higher, that's great, but we have to look at the effect of, it's not a tax credit, right? If it were a tax credit, the government's paying you to lease the car. It's a tax deduction, so you're probably saving by, let's say, leasing the car, you're going to get an extra $4,000 a year of write-off. Okay, let's say that ends up translating to 1% of your salary that you end up getting back from taxes. Maybe, but if you make $100K a year, that's $1,000. So is $1,000 back on a $4,000 expenditure better than what I just did with my car? Probably not. So it's very difficult to change the color of money in deductions and ever say that, oh, I'm getting more and more deductions, so that's better for me. I should spend more money to get more deductions. Usually that logic is bad because we end up spending a lot more than we're getting back. That's not to say that if your company gives you a lease car, you shouldn't use it. If you're in business for yourself and for some reason your accountant says, hey, it's about tax favorable or a wash to do something like this, consider it. But just from a quick judgment, usually it's hard to convert the money in your favor when you're doing deductions. All right, so we're going to talk about how society gets us. Society is always competing for our money. When you drove here today, you saw billboards, you saw restaurants, you saw gas stations, and lots of other businesses who are all trying to compete for your attention and for your money. They literally have marketing teams at Google, at Apple, at any of the big companies, even small companies, who are out there trying to influence you to buy their product. So we know this. So we want to look a little bit today at marketing psychology and understand why that's so important and what are some of the tricks they're using, and then steel ourselves against those tricks. So, latest and greatest. Here's the next one. We got to have it. It's the best. It's the brand new thing. I got to have it. Well, about a year ago, the S20 Ultra came out, and it was $1,400 brand new. What do you think I could get for an S7 at the time? It was about $100. So if you need a cell phone, this goes back to talking about needs versus wants. If you really needed a cell phone, the $100 one would probably do what you needed it to do, and it's still a smartphone. So the latest and greatest is one we got to try to really steel ourselves in. Rule of thumb I use in the world of technology: if it's 6 months to a year old, I'm usually thinking about buying it. If it's brand new, I almost never buy it. Go look at OLED TVs and see how much they were costing a few years ago, how much they're costing now, and they're still a premium, but they were thousands and thousands a few years ago, even 10, 20,000 for an OLED. So that's just the TV. Let's say you'd say, oh, but Josh, I need to do video editing on my computer. It needs to be a gaming rig, so I have to buy an Alienware. Well, you can build a tower for $800 to $1,200 that'll run most games on max settings. You don't need to spend Alienware money. So anyway, just things to think about. I also talk a little bit about Apple versus PC. Most people in here probably know that Apple costs quite a bit more money than PC on average. And why is that? They do about the same thing. Their operating system's a little different, but frankly, every app you want or care about probably runs on both. It's all marketing. That's why. Apple has sold you that we're cleaner, we're faster, we're more efficient, and we're more professional or more artistic or whatever. More of you is Apple. PC is for everyone else. So they've kind of sold that. And it reflects in their price and their proprietary everything. You buy an Apple, you can't just plug it in and charge it with any USB charger. All right, another one, the cost of convenience. Convenience does cost us a lot of money. Anybody ever go to the store and realize a 2-liter costs $1, maybe, sometimes less, but I walk into a Pick Quick or a gas station and it's $2.29 for that 12-ounce bottle. Why is that? That's convenience, right? So why would we ever even pay for the 12-ounce bottle? Or, God forbid, you're in a theme park and you see that 12-ounce bottle and want it. Now it's $8, okay? So it's a mix of supply and demand and convenience. Where is it? How easy is it for us to get? So another one is if we want to consider like gas prices, the Sam's Club gas price, there's always a line there. I don't know if any of you guys have Sam's Club. There's always a line. The pumps are really slow there, but you do save 5 or 10 cents a gallon. So if you're trying to save, that can be worth it, assuming you already have the Sam's Club card. So another thing is, something I'll mention is a poor person habit is to shop at convenience stores. That's a really bad idea. Milk there is expensive, as I just mentioned. Soda's expensive. All these things that it's really common in poor communities to have gas stations on every corner, and people will walk to those and buy what they need for the day rather than going to the store and stocking up. Or some of these people may not even have a vehicle. So it's just something to recognize and to realize that if we want to do better on things like food, we go, we buy, and we go to Sam's Club, we buy in bulk, okay? Anyone want to guess what the problem is with buying in bulk can be? The food goes bad, perfect, food waste. So if we don't budget our food, which we all in here know how to budget now, if we don't budget our food properly, we end up wasting a lot on that, and it might have been cheaper to buy smaller quantities. So the solution for that is something like meal prepping, right? And figuring out, calculate your purchases, do better with coupons, budget out your meals through meal prepping, things like that. So we want to steel our minds against this societal bombardment. We want to recognize some of the traps, and we want to realize that we're in control of our spending and that society doesn't get to tell us what we want or need. It's between us, our spouse, and our immediate family to decide what we actually need. And it's for us to think through what we actually need every time on almost every purchase decision. And I'm not talking about a pair of bananas or, I'm talking about bigger purchase decisions. Proverbs 14:29 tells us, whoever's patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. So that means we want to be patient, we want to be wise, and we want to think through these things. We want to be patient, we want to be content. All right, I'm going to go somewhere that some of us have probably been way too often. It's been a long night. You wake up the next morning, you're groggy, you open your eyes just a little bit, you roll over, and then you feel it. Something that wasn't there, something that wasn't supposed to be there. You get a little bit worried, oh, what did I do? So you look over, and then you see her. She doesn't look as good as she did the night before. And it's that 85-inch Sony TV that you just bought at Sam's Club last night. This is called buyer's remorse. So you look over and you go, you just feel, this is actually a psychological effect that happens almost every time we make a really big purchase. So what causes this stuff? Well, psychologists say it's probably related to some form of cognitive dissonance, which would be specifically a post-decision dissonance. Causes for this are you purchased a product right now rather than waiting. Rather than thinking it through, you made kind of an impulse buy. This is one cause of buyer's remorse. I like to think that it stems from you not analyzing the opportunity cost, and it's your body and subconscious's way of saying, hey, you should have thought about the opportunity cost, but that's just me. The item was purchased in an ethically unsound way. So if you maybe stole it, or if you feel like it was mismarked or something, you might have guilt about that. The property was purchased with borrowed money, meaning if you financed it. There's something your brain does when you're buying things on finance. Sometimes you'll have great remorse over that. And lastly, if you purchased the object and it was something that would not be acceptable to others, like a pink bunny onesie or something, and I know Evan really likes to wear that to bed, but not everyone wants to know about it, and not everyone would want to see him in it. He'd look like a pink nightmare. So, solutions. How do we do that? Well, we only have two options after we've bought it. We can either continue to pay for the bad decision, or we can renounce the purchase. And that's not always an option. So, a lot of times people, it's this idea of, and I cannot remember the psych effect, but it's with gamblers when they get in really deep and they keep thinking, well, I've already got so much money in, I have to keep going or else I can't get out of this. It's a similar psychological effect. And so a lot of people will justify and just say, well, I already bought it, I'm going to eat it and move on with life, and I just won't make this decision again. So don't be afraid or ashamed to take that TV back. You can return it. You usually can get your money back with a receipt. Okay. Big decisions. So what's considered a big decision? Houses, cars, things like that. Okay, I don't know if I can. James, I apologize. Is there any way you could blow up text for me, please? I do have a lot on this one and the next one, and I can't read it. But while he's doing that, there's kind of 4 rules that we're going to want to do. So we want to look at what's a big decision. Sorry, I'll talk about that real quick. A big decision is independent of what I tell you. It's up to your household. The rule of thumb in my household is any purchase over $200 or $300. If it requires a significant investment or a significant amount of capital to your family, then you should probably be discussing that decision. In my case, I'm not Bill Gates, so he may say, well, if it's under $10,000, we don't have to talk about it, Melinda. But for everyone else, we set that limit to what works for our family and what's comfortable. There's kind of 4 rules that we want to use for big decisions. We want to wait overnight. So what you do there is we're going to slow down. We're going to think about the decision. We're going to go home. We're going to discuss it with our spouse, and we're going to sleep on it. Okay? This is especially true of really, really big ones. All right? This may not be, if it's a $500 TV, you guys may say, well, we've talked about it already a little bit, and go ahead. But if it's a big, especially a really big one, you definitely want to at least wait overnight. You want to check your motives. So we want to know, why do we want to buy this thing? Is it a need? Okay, well, if it's a need, then we need to have budgeted for it. We need to be ready for it. We need to tackle it and go for it and figure out how we're going to do that. If it's a want, it's okay to go after wants. But again, did we budget for it? Do we have the money for it? Can we afford it? What's the opportunity cost? Are there other wants that we have that are maybe higher priority? So what's our priority on this? What's our motivation for wanting this right now? In the case where Caleb brought up a classic car last time, you can tell he really likes motorcycles and classic cars. So he's going to self-justify buying that maybe as a higher priority than the big screen TV or something else. So you always have to check that and start saying, well, am I biased towards this? Is this something that's really going to benefit us? Or is it something I've been wanting a long time and saving for? Again, those are all okay things, but you had to have budgeted for it. Okay, number 3, do you understand it? Warren Buffett famously was interviewed, and he talks about not investing in things he doesn't understand. So it's a really good thing to live by. If I was talking about PC and Apple earlier, or if I'm talking about building a computer and you're not tracking what I'm saying, or you're a little lost or confused, you don't necessarily want to go and build or buy a computer, right? Talk to someone maybe who knows, or you don't necessarily want to go into that. That doesn't mean we don't buy a cell phone because we don't know how it works at the electronic level, but it does mean that if we fundamentally don't understand something, for instance, with certain insurance options, which we're going to talk about a little later, if there's something about an insurance option you don't understand, you probably shouldn't buy it. Get informed, get educated, start knowing what you're buying, and then you can make that purchasing decision. Sorry, we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty in that I didn't blow up certain slides properly. Okay, don't worry about it. Just throw it back up. It's okay. I can kind of read it from here anyway. It's just... So one of the stories I guess I'll tell while James is getting it back up was when I was talking about checking your motivation, and there was a girl I knew in college that was just absolutely sure that if she went to Hawaii, she would be happy. This is when I'm talking about checking your motives. That's actually good. That's a lot better. So she thought, if I can just go to Hawaii, I'll take a school opportunity there, or I'll go do something there, and I'll be happy if I can just go there. And so this is one of the problems in Check Your Motives, is it's about contentment and materialism. So I'm going to soapbox for a minute about that, and I have before, but I'm really trying to hammer that one home. Materialism is not going to make you happy. For Christians, our joy comes from the Lord. For other people, material things will not fill you up and make you happy. Even if you're not a Christian, ask any wealthy person. A lot of them actually are still miserable because money didn't make the difference. There is actually a study on the optimal happiness for people, and believe it or not, does anybody want to guess what that number was? Household income about the optimal happiness. After that point, people tend to get more miserable, less happy. Before that point, people tend to be a little more miserable, less happy. What's the peak happiness that researchers found? He says 150. He's actually not far off. I believe it was around 250. But still, that's a high household income. Don't get me wrong. But that's not millions. That's not just so much money that you can just buy whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. So those people, they don't have everything, but they have enough. They have their needs met. They probably have a lot of their wants met, and they don't have any of the other issues. So story with the girl going to Hawaii was that happiness, she goes there, her problems are going to follow her. What else is going to follow her there? Her debt. So just running from your problems won't usually solve it. We have to hit it at the core. So, and Jesus even says that faster cars or bigger houses, those are not happiness. Eternal things over material things are what can make us happy. And that comes out of Luke 12. Okay, can I go to the next one, James? So, yeah, that's the same one. Okay. Okay, so again, I covered don't buy anything that you don't understand. Rule number 4 is there anything else this chunk can be used for that I could do instead? So we want to analyze that opportunity cost. I know it's pesky, it's there all the time, comes up every session for a reason. What could I be spending that money on instead that's going to either grow for me or do more for me or meet a better need or want in my life than what I'm currently going to spend it on? If there aren't a whole lot of things, then you say, okay, this is probably a good decision. So consider this example. There was a guy who was going to go out and he was going to buy a brand new Mercedes, and this was, I think, in the 80s, and a Mercedes in the 80s. So he was going to go and he was going to write a $40,000 check right out of his mutual fund, and he was going to pay for that car cash. He took it home. It felt awesome. It was like a glove. He was driving it, having a great time. And then he realized, he got it home and he sat down with his investment calculator, and he realized that if he instead leaves that $40,000 in his mutual fund account, in even 12 years, it would probably have grown to about $160,000. Well, he realized that Mercedes didn't seem quite as sweet as what he drove home. So he took it back the next day and got his money back. So that was him analyzing the opportunity costs. Years later, he was driving around and he saw a guy driving that same exact model and year of Mercedes. He rolls the window down and he goes and asks him, he says, well, hey, what'd you pay for that? And the guy says, I paid $4,000 for this, and that was right at book value, and he was happy about that. So essentially, if I walked out today and I said, well, I'll give you, if you give me $40,000 today, and in 20 years, I'll give you $4,000 back. And, oh, yeah, okay, you can have this car in the meantime. Or you give me $40,000 today, and in 20 years, I'll give you $200,000 back. Which would you rather take? What deal do we want to take? So this is the idea, and this is why opportunity cost is so important, because what we do with our money today has a significant impact on what we do or what we have tomorrow. And we have to think, what do we even really gain with the Mercedes? Okay, so negotiating, we've got 7 rules. Anyone have a quick story about negotiating poorly? Maybe with your spouse, maybe with somebody else. Anyone want to share something real quick? No? Okay. Well, I'll move on. So, we have 7 rules. We always tell the absolute truth. Why do we always tell the absolute truth? Because the 10% that we're going to save on the deal isn't worth our integrity. And we go back to last session, we think about what was the number one trait among millionaires? Integrity. It matters. We don't want to violate that. We don't want others to think that our integrity isn't there. So, we want to keep that intact. Number 2, the power of cash. I can't tell you guys how many times I've gone to a deal and I was going to go pick something up and we didn't agree on a price. I just said, I'll show up, I want to look at it. I'll look at the item and I'll say, well, it's either in worse condition than what I thought, or I thought it was a little pricey, but I think I can negotiate them down. And I just pull out cash. And I say, well, I'll offer you this amount of cash right now, this cash. People see that, and they instantly are way less attached to that item because they're about to get a serious buyer. And I can tell you from online sales experience that serious buyers are a little bit few and far between. So when someone shows up with cash, they're usually, a serious buyer. Now, a lot of people will lowball with that too. We need to be aware of that, and, if you're not in a hurry to sell, you'll make a little more on your item probably. But be realistic if you're a seller, and I like to be realistic as a buyer too. I kind of know what the market is for things. I try not to offer people something that I wouldn't probably sell it for. So, if I were in their shoes. All right, number 3, walk away power. So this is a great one too. If you're at the car dealership and they just keep saying, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that. Well, we know what our budget is. We know what we can spend. And if it's not in our budget, it's okay for us to say no. It's actually, you're going to have Josh in your head a year from now when you're at the car dealership telling you, hey, walk away. Hey, it's out of your budget. Hey, don't do this. Hopefully. If I did my job, maybe I'll be occupying some real estate up there. So you need to be able to walk away. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who are walking to their car. They get in their car and the person comes out and they flag them down and they say, hey, stop. Okay, we can do that deal. Because a lot of times these people are motivated by the sale. And once you start walking out, they know at car dealerships, it's something like 95% of the people who walk off the lot don't come back. Even when they say, oh yeah, I'll be back tomorrow to pick up that car. Or let me go think about it. Because they want to pressure you in that moment. Remember, we talked about remorse psychology. That 24-hour period to sit and think about something and to sleep on a decision helps you concrete your decision, and it helps people really analyze it a lot more. This is why timeshares, actually, they get you in a room, they put you under a lot of pressure, and they don't let you leave until you've said no at least 10 or 20 times. So part of what I'm teaching you in negotiating too, guys, is so that we understand both sides of it. You know what people are throwing at you, and you know how to negotiate as well. Number 4, learn to shut up. What I usually do in the class is I'll stand up here and I'll be just quiet for like 30 seconds, just dead silent, and somebody will usually talk, okay? It's human psychology. People are really uncomfortable with silence, with absolute quiet. They want to fill that space with something. So if we're in a negotiation and we've sort of said what we want, just shut up and let the salesman do their job and come back with something. Sometimes they'll say or do something that shows their hand a little more, and we don't tip our hand too much. If we're just sitting there talking the entire time, then we have a problem. This thing also works with the police, but that's a whole different seminar. So, but for all you youngins out there, don't talk to the police. It never helps you. That's all I'll say. All right. So, people, last one. Okay, number 5. No, not last one. Number 5. That's not good enough. So that's a common one, and if you pair that with the silence technique, you're going to find you have pretty good results. So you say, well, I'm sorry, that deal just isn't good enough. What else can you do? And just let them go. And then if they can't do way better and it's not in what you had already agreed to do, then what do? Number 3, we walk away. Sometimes I like to think about that. God says 3 things to us when we ask him for something. He says yes, no, or grow. What I mean by that is sometimes he'll grant us what we want. Sometimes that's not necessarily what we need. Sometimes he won't. He'll say no. And sometimes he'll say, no, you need to grow a little bit before I can use you more. Okay? That's what I mean by that. So, number 6, the good cop, bad cop. We have all heard this one. Again, from my law enforcement seminar, the polygraph machine is a good example of this. It's not admissible in court. There's nothing useful about a polygraph machine other than maybe among the lawyers and the perception of it. But if you're in a trial, it will never be used. Basically, it can help you in a plea deal, maybe. But what often happens is they'll hook you up to the polygraph and they'll ask you all these questions, and then the officer says, well, let me just turn this machine off, and I'm going to ask you a few questions just heart to heart, because the machine, it's going to catch you. But I'm your friend, you can talk to me. And 9 times out of 10, the confession comes at that point, not even while they were answering questions on the polygraph. And ask any scientist what they think of a polygraph machine. There's a reason they're not admissible to court. They're not very good. They're really just an elaborate good cop, bad cop. But I'm not saying either that we use this good cop, bad cop in our negotiating skills, but you need to be aware of it. Another really common way of this is when the car salesman is talking to you and he says, I'd love to help you. I really want to get you this deal, but my manager, I got to ask my manager. I'm on your side, but my manager isn't, and let me go ask him. And they'll go for 20 minutes, make you sit and wait while they go just sit and have coffee. That's part of a stall tactic too. There's some psychology with that. But that's an example of them trying to be on your side and pitting you against the manager and then gaining your trust that way. Okay, number 7, if I take away X, then what? A lot of times we talk about bundle deals. Let's go back to that 85-inch TV that we woke up next to. Maybe we bought it with a surge protector, a $60 HDMI cable, a wall mount that they sold us for $100, and so all that package and bundle added an extra $300 or $400 to the whole deal. So a lot of times what we want to ask is, well, what if I take away that nav system from the car? What if you get me one that doesn't have that? What if you take some of those bundled items away? Now what's my price? Again, guys, we get back to this idea of what's the total cost, and we want to isolate that. And last thing I'll say is car salesmen, they love to get you on the payment thing. They'll talk to you all day about the payment you can do. So then that's the first thing they'll usually ask. When I was at a car dealership, that's what they asked me. Well, what payment can you do? And I just threw out some number. And then we got to the final negotiating, and I said, well, what's the final price? And I said, well, if you can get me this price, I'll give you either cash or I'll write you a check for that price. And they didn't know what to do. And they actually let me walk in that case. Anyway, just some random stories there. So those are the 7 negotiating things. All right, so we're talking about the financial battle. We want to develop a good offense and a good defense. We all in here know who follow football is that Super Bowl teams often always win when they have a good offense, but when they have a terrific defense. Usually it's the defense that wins Super Bowls, okay? Our offensive measures are our budgeting, how we're commanding our money, and then our investing habits and how we're growing our money. Our defensive measures are our emergency funds, our savings, and our insurances. So before we jump into those, I want to talk a little bit about risk. So we need to understand risk. We need to understand that risk by definition is our exposure to something dangerous or something that could hurt us. In the case of financial risk, it's our exposure to liabilities or our exposure to anything that, again, might drain our wealth, like huge medical bills or a fire or a flood on our house, those kinds of things. There are two kinds of risks. There's risks that we can deal with ourselves, like a flat tire, right? We get a flat tire, well, what's the cost to repair a tire? Under $100. If we have to go get a new tire, it's probably under $100 or around there. So the second kind of risk is things we cannot absorb ourselves. These are things like cancer or your house burning down. I can't just write a check for the cost of my house. So what we want to do is I want to teach you guys a little bit about real versus conditional risk. And there's some really, really neat insight, I think, in this for people. So the first one is, I'm going to say, if you ever watch the World Series of Poker, I'm a bit of a poker player. I enjoy cards. There's a little bit of math in there, so it's kind of fun. So if you ever watch the World Series of Poker and you're watching a poker hand, it'll usually say this guy has 70% chance, this guy has 30% chance. What they're actually showing you there is what's called the real probability. They know the absolute probability because what they know is they have scanners and they've seen every single card that's been folded as well. So they know what's in each player's hand and they know what's been folded. To give you guys an example, in poker, you're trying to make a good hand. So if I have a pair of pocket aces, 2 aces in my hand, and I know that somebody, and I think that those could come, if I get an ace, I've got 2 cards in the deck that can make my hand better. If an ace comes up, I've got a really great hand. If an ace doesn't come up, I have a decent hand. But let's say that 2 other people at the table had already folded out, and both of them folded down an ace. So my actual probability of getting an ace is 0. I have 0 chance of getting an ace because there's only 4 in the deck. But I don't know that. So see, that's the difference between real probability or real risk. My real probability of getting that ace is a goose egg. What I think my conditional probability is when I'm playing the game is I think there are 2 aces in the deck, so I think I have about a 4% chance of hitting those. So you see the difference, okay? Now, here's what's really cool. God knows all the cards that have been played. So he knows our real risk in all situations. Who better to listen to then? So I'm going to tell you guys one other heartbreaking story real quick, and it's the Audi R8, and this is the one that got away. So my wife was working for a fairly wealthy person in El Paso. She caught her husband cheating and calls up. The wife says, I have this Audi R8. For anyone who knows, if you watch Iron Man, it's what Tony Stark drives. It's a supercar. I thought the car was worth about $80,000. Just off the cuff, I'm like, it's about an $80,000, $90,000 car, maybe $100,000 brand new. And so my wife calls me and she says, hey, my boss is selling this car. She asked me if I want it for $55,000. So I'm thinking, okay, conditional probability, right? Well, it's worth about 80. It's probably a year or 2 old. I might be able to get 60 for it. 55 is, yeah, it's a deal, but I'm going to have to tie up a lot of money, and I might have to who's going to go around buying an Audi R8? Who has $60,000 they're going to pay at not a dealer? It's hard to sell a high-end car, private sale. So I'm like, I don't know that the margin's there. So the next day or 2, I was kind of busy and I didn't really focus on it much. Well, then about day 3, I start researching and I realize Audi R8s actually are brand new for about $130,000. $120,000, somewhere in there. So I say, hey, can I get the VIN number? Turns out this is a brand new car. It only had 2,000 miles on it. The retail they had paid was $135,000, and I found a dealership over in Scottsdale with the VIN number that was going to give me $102,000 just to drive it over there. So my real probability is I should have bought that car, drove it to Scottsdale, and made $50,000 like that, okay? But I didn't understand my real versus my conditional risk at the time. I didn't research it well enough, and actually, to anyone who's played poker, this is maybe what you might call a bad beat, and believe it or not, I'm okay and I sleep at night knowing I missed that. Because I called like that day and I said, I'll show up with cash today. Well, turns out she had given it or sold it already. So I lost that opportunity because I sat on it. But I wouldn't advise you guys, because I just said you sleep on it, you think about it, you analyze it, and until I knew that it was a sure bet or a much lower risk bet, You can see from when I told the story, at first I thought it was a pretty high-risk thing. I might have to tie up a lot of money and I may not find a buyer for quite a while. So to a guaranteed return, the risk shifted a lot based on the details. So I don't regret that decision. I made the right conditional probability based on my information. All right. So this is all the insurances. We're going to go through these pretty quick. I have a handout. I didn't print them. I'm gonna just mail this out to everybody who signed up for the class. I'll email it out to you. Honestly, it'll probably be next week unless I can get to my work computer. I'm not working in my office this week, so if I can get that out to you guys, I will. But okay, so desirable insurances. We've got auto insurance, home and renters, medical or health care, disability, long-term care, maybe identity theft. I'm on the fence on that one, and life insurance. So I'll break down each one really quickly. Auto is for, obviously, your car. If you wreck your car, some quick takeaways are we really want our liability coverage high. It's really, really cheap for liability coverage, and lawsuits are not under $100,000 anymore. They just aren't, guys. So Dave Ramsey recommends $500,000 at minimum in liability, okay? I don't disagree with him too strongly on that. If you have to save a little more, look at $150,000 to $250,000 or something like that. But this really does protect you. It protects your house. A bad lawsuit can mean they own you and everything you own. So again, remember we talked about risk and what we're trying to avoid. We don't want to lose all of our net worth over one car accident. Okay, another one is possibly dropping collision. Collision coverage is only if you wreck your car. So if you're doing something stupid, we have control over us. We don't always have control over other people. If we're in a no-fault state, then I'd probably carry collision. Just keep that in mind. But, look at some ways to maybe take from your policy if you need to cheapen it down, but don't do it in liability. That's the takeaway. Homeowners. There's two things, guaranteed replacement cost versus extended replacement cost. Guaranteed replacement cost means that if my house, I bought it at $200,000 and now it's worth $600,000, it will be replaced at the full $600,000 value, whatever the market value was at that day that it burnt down. Extended replacement cost usually only goes to about 50% of the value. So in this example, everything over about $300,000 would be lost in that case. So you generally want to look for guaranteed replacement cost. Renter's insurance, if you're renting, just get it, guys. If it covers lost and stolen things, and I'll note that the landlord cannot legally cover you, okay? It is illegal for a landlord to cover the assets of a renter. You have to have renter's insurance. Last one is umbrella policies. If you find yourself your net worth is probably starting to get north of, I'd say, $500,000 to $1 million, you probably want to consider an umbrella policy. What this does is it's extra liability that tacks on to your home and your auto insurance, all that liability we were talking about. So if someone sues you, this will usually tack on an extra $1 million or more to the coverage to protect you. And umbrella policies usually aren't more than a couple $100s a year. So if you're in that net worth range of you're starting to get higher up and you feel like you need that extra coverage, look into one of those. They're really good. Okay, so the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country is actually medical bills. Okay? I'm sure we could have some political discussions about that and things that need to change. That's a different stage, a different time. But credit card debt's number two, just so you guys know. So 69% of Americans are covered through work. We're talking about 80-20 plans. Let's say you have a $100,000 bill, you're still on the hook for $20,000 of it. Stop loss is another one. That's where they come in and they'll pick up whatever you can't pay after a certain amount. We usually avoid that. What we want to do is we want to look for plans that fit our needs the best. For instance, if we've got, let's just say, if you've got $40,000 in the bank, then an 80-20 plan with $20,000 may not scare you as much. But if you have $2,000 in the bank, then that might scare you a whole lot because now you're going to be behind for a few years trying to pay off that debt. So that's where we talk about the health savings account. This is a really good, it's things I like about it, things I don't. The benefits are it is pre-tax, so you can take money pre-tax, put it away for your family. It works with high deductible plans, usually around $5,000 or $10,000 a year. But once you've paid that deductible, you pay nothing else the rest of the year, no matter what your medical bills were. Or it's to limit. They have limits, but for the most part, it'll cover you 100%. So this is actually, HSAs are really, really good for super healthy people. And then you end up banking $5,000 a year. And then when you're not healthy, when you're older, you now have this huge chunk of money you can spend on medical. Or when that chunk comes, oh, bam, pre-tax money right there, ready to go. Or if you're actually very unhealthy and you have a lot of medical bills, paying that $5,000 and then getting everything else covered is a deal for you. So I highly recommend looking into HSAs. They can be really beneficial. I had something else I was going to say on these. I'll come back to it if I think about it. I'm trying to move through these fairly quickly because we started a little late and there's a lot here. So disability, short-term versus permanent. So short-term disability is usually 3 to 6 months. Ironically enough, if last year when I taught this class was the very start of coronavirus, if everyone in the class had rushed out and got short-term insurance, they actually would have made pretty good money if they lost their job due to corona. I don't normally recommend short-term though. Anybody want to guess why I don't recommend 3 to 6 months worth of pay if you're hurt? What should our emergency fund be? 3 to 6 months. So if we're to the point where our emergency fund is established, short-term disability is fairly expensive, I believe, and it only covers us in that real short term. And most disabilities statistically are going to take you out of the game a lot longer than 3 to 6 months. Out of people polled, only about 2% said that they think they would be disabled in their career. 2%. I think of all workers, but forgive me, I don't have it's in that study. Only 2% thought that something bad was going to happen, but in fact, about 25% of 20-year-olds, that means from, let's just count me as close to the 20-year-olds. Of these 4 right here, one of us is going to have a permanent disability that could take us out of working for our entire life. Statistically, that'll happen. So we want long-term disability. The way that works is we pay into it. After a 3 or a 6 month term, depending on what your policy says, it'll start kicking in and it'll pay your salary that you were making before you got hurt. Now, it's a prorated amount. It's usually about 60%. But here's another really cool thing. To everyone who, when you were doing your budget and I told you, what are your tax rates? 30 to 40%. So getting 60% of what you were making isn't bad if you're getting it all tax-free. Leads me to my next thing. We only pay for disability coverage after tax. Never do a pre-tax option for this. If you do a pre-tax option, any money you get from disability will be taxed, and now your 60% turns into about 40%. And it's a lot harder to live on 40% of what you were making instead of about what you were pulling in after taxes. So just keep that in mind. This is one of the few ones. HSAs, we can take advantage of pre-tax. This one, we have to take advantage of post-tax. Have to. If you learn nothing else about long-term disability, it's that you need it. You should probably get it. It's not that expensive, and pay for it post-tax. A couple other things. There's a couple other ones, like I think it's called occupational disability. And occupational disability is for somebody like Glenn Beck, who's a radio voice. And if he loses his voice, it covers a very specific, meaning you can't go back into that industry. So maybe look into that, but most people don't need it. All right. Long-term care insurance. Okay, this is for usually grandma and grandpa when they need to go to the home. Long-term care is really important. We don't buy it before age 60. 75% of women will outlive their husbands. The reason we don't buy this before age 60, guys, it's a waste of money. I think fewer than 1% of people die before age 60. or are in a nursing home before age 60. So I'll correct that. This covers your nursing home, okay? Nursing homes cost between $50,000 and $80,000 per year. I'm going to jump back, if you guys remember the example I gave you last week with the lady who had the inheritance, and I said she was going to be set up for around $90,000 a year. Part of what I had in my mind for that was that if she has to go to a home, she's more than covered. And not only that, with that money, we would have bought long-term care insurance anyway for her, so she wouldn't have ended up having to lose that. Anywho, I'll digress. Homes are expensive, and 75% of women do outlive their husbands. Life expectancy for a woman is about 79 years. A male is 72 years. Watch any of those videos of guys climbing on ladders that they shouldn't be, and you'll know why men don't live as long as women. All right, let's say that those are 50 to 80K a year. Let's say grandpa has a pretty good nest egg of 400,000 or 500,000, but he ends up in a home, and after a few years of that, that's pretty much drained. He dies, grandma's perfectly healthy, but now she's going to live another 8, maybe even 10 years on what? Nothing. Grandpa blew it all. Another thing, just a quick commentary, is that Americans don't die well. So it costs us, our biggest costs are in our last 6 months of living, okay? We just don't die well. It's just super expensive. We're usually on hospice and extreme, ventilators, anything else. I mean, sometimes anyway, I'll move on from that. But it's, and then diaper syndrome. Okay, this is one that I've had actual case that happened to me. Someone was asking me about this long-term care, and they said, well, my mom doesn't want to listen to me. She doesn't take advice. She changed my diapers, so she doesn't listen to me on sex or money, okay? And our parents don't want to hear about those topics from us. My family never listens to me on financial advice. I'll put that out there. So I don't know if that gives you guys confidence or not. But so overcoming this diaper syndrome can be really hard. So let's say, what do you guys think I told that lady about this long-term care when she said my mom won't buy it? What did I tell her to do? Anyone want to guess? I bought it for her. Yes, very good. So I told her, I said, just buy it for mom. Take care of it. You'll thank me later. And it did kick in. So, all right, identity theft. We're going to skip this. You guys have all heard the LifeLock commercials. You know if you need it. If you're going to get it, make sure you have a company that will go and fight the case for you, not just credit monitoring. Credit monitoring is done by your credit cards and other companies at creditkarma.com. You can do that anywhere, and you don't have to pay for it. You need somebody that's actually going to get in the trenches and fight for you if you get ID thefted. Part of the reason I don't see as much need for this anymore is I do a credit card, and my wife as well has used credit cards and even I think debit cards, and her cards have been fraudulent at least 4 times in the last couple of years. Somebody making unauthorized purchases. The companies always jump in quickly. They know it's not authorized. They take care of it. They take it off the bill, and it was little hassle. So maybe there's a need for these, maybe less. I haven't seen as much, but if you find this valuable, go for it. Life insurance. Biggest one here, guys, I could spend a while on this slide, but biggest one here is we want term life insurance, okay? 40% of Americans do not have any life insurance, okay? That's a problem. So one type is called cash value. It's called universal whole, variable universal life, something like that. These are called whole life policies, and you've probably heard, oh, come get a whole life policy from Penn, I don't know. Anyway, there's all these commercials. It's always on when I'm at my grandparents' house. All the programming on Little House on the Prairie, all the commercials are whole life insurance. And I think my family had a whole life policy. I think my grandpa does. But the idea there is you pay into it your whole life. It might cost you $100 a month, and then they give you a certain benefit. But also, all that money goes into an account, and it grows for you. They invest it. And a whole life insurance agent, they will tell you, we're investing your money for you. We're doing a great thing. And if he dies at any point, before a certain age, we'll cover you up to a certain amount. And then after that, you get this money as equity. So if he gets too old for us to cover, you get all this money anyway. And it can grow to 30, 40, 60, 80, $100,000. I mean, it can get up there. So why don't we like whole life? Well, the problem is, anybody want to guess? Why don't we like whole life? What's the problem? What's something that I always harp on? Yes, we make more if we invest it ourselves. Opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. So we're basically giving it to them, and they're giving us a 2 or 3% growth rate, which is awful. So, all right. So the you always need life insurance myth. I'm going to debunk that one really quickly. Okay. Right now, I am, let's say, 34, and I have $5,000 in the bank, and I still owe on a house and a car. Do I need life insurance? Yes, because if I were to die tomorrow, my wife loses my income, and she's stuck with all that debt that I couldn't pay off. So a good amount for me to have would be at least my house, my car, maybe some other things. Okay, I'll mention that real quick because I missed it in the car one. A lot of add-ons we don't want. I think it's in the, I think I have it coming up. But there are certain things like adding life insurance to your car policy, so you pay them extra, and if you die, your car gets paid off. Those are all gimmicks. Don't do that. Just buy more liability coverage in your auto insurance, and then buy more term life. It's way cheaper. Term life is cheap. Now, let's fast forward, and let's say now I'm 55. I have $2 million in an investment account for retirement, and my house is paid off. Do I need life insurance? No. My wife is taken care of if I die. The $2 million can provide her some residual income, and she doesn't have a lot of debt. Why do I need a life insurance policy? That's what I'm talking about. This is why we can get rid of life insurance after a certain age. So our prime time to have life insurance is while we're building wealth, usually our first 20 years of employment. So for Nathan over here, he'll be out of college probably around 28 or 30 because he's kind of a slow learner. Just kidding. So from age 25 to about age 45 is where he's going to really want that. Maybe take a 20 or 25-year policy. That's what we're looking for term life. If you don't have it yet, look into it. It's not that expensive either. We also want to insure our spouse, even a stay-at-home spouse. I think the recommendation there is $250,000 to $400,000. The recommendation for term life on us, by the way, for anybody who's working, is 10 times your current salary. 20 if you want to be overzealous, but 10 times your current salary. So if you make $80,000, you want your policy to be at minimum of $800,000. There are some reasons for that, but it has to do with the 10% rate of return if it's invested would give you roughly what you're making now. If we want to do what's called the 4% rule, which I think is a lot safer, that's why I say a multiplier of 20 or 25 is a lot safer, but we can't always afford that. So we have to get what we can afford at least 10 times, all right? We also don't need life insurance on children. As hard as this is to say, or as hard as it is, you need burial costs. That's it. Sorry, it's a rough topic, but your kids aren't usually producing income, and your family isn't reliant on that income unless they're an Olsen twin or something. Yes, question?
So my question about that is, how do you plan for like funeral expenses and things like that?
So how do you plan for funeral expenses or things like that? You can either set aside a little in your budget. You can buy a cheap life insurance because term life on a kid is super cheap. I mean, you could get a 20-year policy on a 1-year-old for dollars a month, or like, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be that. So, but you don't have to insure, and your emergency fund maybe, things like that. Did you have a question, Avi? Oh, there's burial insurance for that? Okay, and it's probably very cheap? Okay. So that's an add-on you could probably get to your own life or other policy that you have that'll be pretty low. Yeah. So anything that's a liability of 10 or 20,000, yeah, it's going to be pretty cheap. So that's probably what I'd look at for that. All right. Insurance to avoid. All of these. I'm not going to go through all of them. They'll be in the handout. We want to look for bells and whistles things we don't understand, jumping back to that. Accidental death is very, very specific. Oh, I get more if I die a certain way. We're not we're not betting on how we're going to die. We're just betting that we might. So it's almost always better in these cases to just get more term life policy than to bet on some of these special things. Cancer and hospital indemnity, usually that's it's very specific. We're betting that we're going to get cancer. That's not what we're betting on. We're betting on we get sick or some major medical setback, not specifically cancer. So a lot of times these are just money grabs, and they're not really giving us value for what we're having to pay for them. All right, 78% of Americans die without a will. Get a will. I wrote one about 3 years ago, and I do update it every 3 to 5 years. Or I will update it probably in the next year or two. So please get a will. I don't care how old you are. If you're under 18, probably doesn't matter. But if you have any assets at all to your name, any assets at all, please get a will. Also, families fight a lot in death. I'm sure many of you have had the unfortunate of having to go through some of that. And I'll tell you, worse than grieving for the person dying is sometimes seeing your loved family that's still alive fighting over sometimes even scraps. I mean, I'm not even kidding, some of the petty stuff. Anyway, a will helps to sort that out too. Then they can be mad at you, the dead person, not the family that's fighting over it. So, I wanted to cover today the college question, and this is a really good one. And I moved it to today just because I wanted to speed through insurances. So the college question is, what do we do? Remember we talked about securing other people's loans and some of that kind of things. So as parents, we have to really look at college, and we have to really consider it. There are a lot of plans out there, like the 529 plan, which are some pre-tax plans. You can set up Roth IRAs for your kids as well and invest on their behalf. There's all kinds of different ways we can actually grow money for college. But let's go through some stats. 53% of kids who start college actually graduate. So 50-50, it's a coin flip, guys. You start college, you may not graduate. If I go to college and I start and I don't graduate, then I don't even get the piece of paper I was trying to invest in, and now I'm just stuck with the debt still. The debt doesn't go away. So we have to deal with the debt still, and we don't have a degree to show for it, so we don't even get that increased income potential that we were trying to invest in. 69% of all students take loans, and an average loan size of about $30,000. 14% of parents take out average of $37,200 in Parent Plus loans. A Parent Plus loan is just you taking it on behalf of your kid for their college. Okay? This is a risk. College is a risk based on this stuff. Not only that, college is expensive, and it's only been going up. So, your kid comes to you and they say, I have to go to an Ivy League school. Mom, I got to go to Harvard. Well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to get a degree in social work. Why are you going to Harvard? So how many of you in here have been to the doctor in the last year? Show of hands. Okay, how many people in here asked their doctor where he got his medical degree or her medical degree? We do. You actually did. You're killing my okay, I'm done. You want to? So most of us don't care, except for the really weird ones. But seriously, guys, when we're talking about where we went to school, and even when I introduced myself, I didn't tell you where all I went to school, right? University of Phoenix Online. No, I'm just kidding. But you laugh, but then if you have a nursing degree and you're working as a nurse, it didn't matter where you worked. What matters now is what you can do in your field and what you're providing for your patients in the hospital. So Ivy League schools cost a lot. That's what it says on the left. And we have similar salary projections, and I actually self-cited here. I caught this today when I was looking. So I did an analysis on this in 2016, and I wrote up like a 5 or 10 page, and I was deep diving into costs of tuition and opportunity costing across all these things and laying it out for some budding high schoolers that I knew who were trying to make this very decision, and that's why I put this together and put it in here. Anyway, college degrees average 500% increase earnings over a high school degree and about 136% over trade school. I'm not dogging trade school, guys. Trade school, we need people that do that, and it can be really good for you, especially if you're considering what I would call less popular or less useful college degree versus a very useful trade. So I'm not dogging trade schools at all. I'm just talking about the college decision, and it can be applied to the trade school decision because we're using ROI and opportunity cost. So there's one time that I'm going to ever tell you to go to Ivy League school. What does an Ivy League school have that no state school in the country has? Networking. Donald Trump's nephew. Bill Gates' second cousin's nephew. Bill Gates' daughter is an equestrian, and she just went to med school. She's going over in Israel right now, I think. But point is, if you're going to the school where Bill Gates' daughter goes, and you happen to meet her and marry her, well, I'm a kept man. So you get what I mean. So networking can be very valuable, and it can give you avenues that you otherwise wouldn't have had to you. And you do have the name recognition of Ivy League, which can help you. I'm not saying it won't. But for the amount of cost, that's a pretty big if. The only way I would go to Ivy League is if it was fairly close in cost to what I would have with other options through scholarships and things like that I was offered, and I wanted to take advantage of the networking. Okay, so college the right way. We want to go to community college for 2 years. After about a year and a half, so we're past the age where college credits don't transfer well from community college. If you go to DACC, NMSU will accept every single credit there. It's so integrated and streamlined, you won't have an issue. Now, if you go to DACC, then try to transfer to Ohio State, you might have some problems. Transferring credits college to college is an issue, but if you're in the pipeline for a school that you like NMSU, you go to the community college attached to that school, then you go to that school, you will have zero issues, okay, with transfer credits. Community college is extremely cheap compared to other tuition types. Okay, another big one. After 1.5 years, do not change your major. Okay, the reason for this is you take what are called gen eds or general education courses. You take those in your first year or two. It's like English 101, philosophy 101, all those things that as a physics major, I don't care about. I take those because I have to take them because liberal arts degree says I have to take them. And if you can knock those out in high school, even better, okay? All these kids who do the AP. Speaking of that, to you kids out there who are doing the AP in New Mexico, take the AP test. For God's sakes, seriously. I was tutoring some kids, and none of them in their whole class took the AP math class, even though they were in an AP calculus class. Why? You're giving up college credit by not taking that AP test. And it's because the teachers were afraid they'd all score too low. And what does that say about New Mexico? Anyway, moving on. So in state schools, public versus private is usually best. We usually want in-state schools. Out-of-state tuition's higher. Again, our analysis for this is if I get a full ride at Harvard, I would never tell you to turn that down. You go to Harvard. You get a full ride at Ohio State from New Mexico, go if that's where you want to go, if they have a program you like. But if it's going to cost you an extra $20,000 a year to go out of state for the same degree that you'd get in state, why are we doing that? There has to be some kind of intangible or really valuable added. There's something called value added, and we have to look at that. In a process, sometimes there are certain things that will create more opportunity for you. The really quick example was in my case, I went to a private Catholic university in University of Dayton in Ohio. I could have gone to Ohio State. I could have gone to a number of other schools, actually. I looked at like Arizona State and a few others. But believe it or not, University of Dayton gave me a really good scholarship package. At the end of the day, it cost me about $10,000 more than it would have cost me to go to Ohio State. I still went there, though, because they're next to the largest Air Force base in the world, or at least research output per capita in the world, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It's huge. Huge opportunities there, and I knew that as a scientist, I could get into one of the labs. Sure enough, my second year there, I'm 19 years old, I got hired in a lab, and I was making pretty good money as a college student working in a lab. That was way better, and I came out of college financially a lot better off than I would have if I would have gone to Ohio State and not worked. We're going to talk about working here in a sec too. So that's going where you have the most financial incentive. Compare on-campus and off-campus housing options. Another example from my time at UD is I believe they were charging me something like $700 or $800 a semester and there were like 6 guys living in my 3-bedroom house. So it's literally bunk beds, and you have to think, okay, well, if I'm in Dayton, Ohio, and I had, I think it was the equivalent of $600 or $700 a month maybe. Either way, I had the equivalent of at least $2,000 a month budget if all 6 of us would have gone and bought a house somewhere, rented a house, done something. At least, maybe more. So you have to analyze that a little bit. And there are benefits to being on campus. So I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't, but analyze it at least. ACT and SAT tutoring. People with tutors tend to score higher. I have a really good success story of a girl that I tutored. She was really smart anyway, and I didn't have to do a lot. But I gave her a lot of extra work, got her a lot really far ahead. And she ended up improving her score over the course. Her poor mom made her take the test like 5 or 6 times. But over the course of that, she ended up getting about 150 points higher on the SAT and probably 2 to 3 points higher on the ACT. So that kind of tutoring can help, working with your kid or getting them some additional testing. Why do I recommend this one so much? Our scholarships are often based on our standardized test scores. So if your student is able to score really high on standardized test scores, they're able to get more scholarship. That's part of how I closed the gap at UD, is I scored extremely high on some of these tests. Gaining advantages and seizing opportunity. So what was I going to go with for there? Oh, okay. I could give you a lot of stories, but this is basically just seizing any opportunity you can. If you find a chance to do extra research with a professor in college and it's going to take up some of your time, even if you're not getting paid, could be really valuable. It's a resume builder. I now read resumes, and I love that kind of stuff because a lot of undergrads don't come out with a whole lot. But if they have research projects under their belt, even if they weren't paid, instantly, head and shoulders above another candidate. You also learn networking. It can get you opportunities for things like working at the base in a research lab, which is kind of how I stumbled into it, was working with professors for free on campus for a while. So, working in college, we want to get a job. There's actually a really good study on it, but when my family sent me to college, they said, we want you to focus on your grades, don't work. Well, the problem was that I didn't get a whole lot of financial help. And so I had to get a job. I had to work. And so my first year, I had 2.5 jobs while I was doing school, and then 1.5 jobs with the base and teaching. So they found that 10 to 19 hours actually has better grades. The average GPA is a 3.13 for a student that works 19 hours or less, compared to a student that works 0 hours and has a 3.04 GPA. So what's that, a half a letter grade maybe? So point is, it teaches responsibility, and it can teach you how to budget your time, and it also gives you extra money in your pocket so you come out with less debt. All of these things are good. So income, and the income can pay down your debt, and you also have some other benefits from working, like I mentioned. Another thing I'm going to mention here, for funding college, we never save using insurance or bond. Investing is better. It's the same reason we don't buy whole life. We can do better with our money than an insurance or a bond will do. Next, we don't want prepaid tuition. You're giving your money to the government. We don't want to be giving our money to the government. We already give enough of their money to the government. It forces that money to be a certain color, and we have to use it on that thing. We don't like to do that. Take it on your own. Put it either into a tax favorable account and then grow it there. Tax favorable plans are the 529 and the ESA. Those are both useful. One thing I'm going to mention, I have a quick story on that. We got 5 minutes left, so we won't get a lot of questions today. But you guys are free to ask me after class. Speaking of, if you're online and you have any questions, please drop them in now, and James will read them. At the end, I'll make time for online questions at least. And please say hi at least or something so I can get your attendance. So, okay, college repayment case study. The example I was going to give you. Friend of ours, wife's friend, worked at McDonald's, and she ended up working her way up in McDonald's, paying off school as she went. She ended up graduating with no debt and ended up actually not using her degree because she promoted so high in McDonald's that she was making pretty good money. Just an example. working our way through college, the one thing I want you to change your mentality on in college is you don't have to just leave your home, go for 4 years, live on Party Island and study, and graduate with a degree and a bunch of debt. We don't have to do it that way. We can take 5 or 6 years and work our way through school. We can pay as we go. There are ways to do that, okay? There are ways to do that mixed with maybe a little bit of debt or something, but we don't have to be taking crazy amounts of debt. So change your thinking on that and how you approach that. Okay, so I have one friend who loves this case. He has, I'm pretty sure online, I see a violin come out and play every time he talks about this. He completed a degree in a less than favorable field. It was still a STEM field, but he borrowed $65,000. I had to calculate at about a 12% interest rate. The thing he never tells in his story is he gets out and he says, oh, everybody, this is the problem with college loans. They were predatory. I was just an 18-year-old. I didn't know any better. And I take all these loans and now I owe them money back. And I've paid almost $65,000 over the last 7 years, and I'm still not making a dent on the principal. Look at me, look at this problem. Well, he fails to admit that he didn't pay for 3 years. Now he owes over $110,000, and he's paying $800 a month. So the math question is, if you guys were going to go home and calculate it on your own, the homework would be, can he ever pay it off? The answer is no. If he would have paid it off as agreed, that would be his green line, and he would have actually had it paid off by now. But because he waited just 3 years in deferment, 3 years, it caused his principal to grow. And now it's still growing because his interest payment was, let me see if I have it on there on my slide. Well, no, but I thought I had it. Oh, I do, I have it up here. It's because his interest every year that accrues is around $10,200, but if he's only paying $800 a month, that's only $9,600. He's actually growing his account, even paying $800 a month, okay? This is what I was talking about, guys, with the power of compound interest and one of the big issues. So he took 3 years off not paying, and it crippled him financially, and he'll never recover unless he gets way more aggressive about paying this down. And then he won't be able to do any of his other financial goals. So college debt is not something to mess with, and this is why. This is why it's dangerous. So next time, investing extravaganza, we're going to be talking about lots of investing. And guess what? More investing in an overview, and retirement accounts, which are investment accounts. And we're going to learn how to invest, and we're going to learn about tax favorable accounts while we're investing. And I was going to do the college question, but I did that this week. So next week's pretty much all investing stuff. So questions from online? No questions. Questions from the floor. I can take 1 or 2 quick ones. Anything? All right, so existing student loan debt. You've got 1 or 2 possible prayers. If you're in a helping profession, if you're in a helping profession and you can work for, I think it's 10 years in the field, then the government will forgive your loans. So you do an income-based repayment. I will tell you this about that. Anytime somebody's offering to pay your student debt free for doing a certain thing, the loopholes and the requirements for that certain thing are so stringent and so difficult that most people don't get them, and they end up getting the rug pulled out from under them, and they ended up just doing minimum income-based payments for 10 years, and now they owe more. So it's dangerous to even rely on that, and that's what that guy's relying on, is eventually he's hoping the government will just mean he doesn't have to take it away and he doesn't have to pay anymore. So if I have current existing debt and I don't have any chance of forgiveness, what I need to do is I need to consider paying those down pretty rapidly. You need to look at your interest rate, and you need to look at, how does that compare to your other debts and what your total debt is. And I get the sense for your question, it's probably for buying a house, should I pay off all my student loans before I start buying the house? The Dave Ramsey answer is yes. The Josh answer is you might be able to start saving a little bit for your house, but it's going to take longer. But I would definitely be paying more on your loan than the interest every year. You need to be making a dent in that principal no matter what, because if that's rolling out of control, it's just going to make you poorer, as you saw with that guy. And that guy isn't an extreme outlier, but it can get you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm constantly getting mailers from my bank wanting me to sign up for this free AD&D insurance policy. I think the hope is the underwriter's wanting you to purchase extra.
Okay.
I usually ignore them, but would you take the free policy?
So the question is, my bank sends me these mailers with offers for free. It's life insurance, right?
The accidental death and
Oh,
disability.
accidental death. One of the fun things is I talk about the mouse trap, and there's cheese in the mouse trap, and the mouse doesn't understand why the cheese is free. So with free things, we always need to try to understand why it's free. And I think you're right. They're probably trying to sell you or offer you other things, additional things. Once they get you in the door, then they can try to trump up your policy. If it's truly free, there's usually no harm in going in and listening. Just like a timeshare program, there's no harm in listening, just don't say yes to everything. Make sure you have a steel wall up and that you don't make a purchasing decision that day because I bet it's going to be higher pressure. Just intuition. So good question, though. All right, guys, well, we'll end there. Thank you all for coming out, and it was really, hopefully, something good for you all to learn tonight. And we'll see you all next time.